It's a Friday night, and you're all in a room listening to a weird guy from the Netherlands. We're all weird in the Netherlands anyway, but can you all understand English well enough so I can speak really, really fast? Because I have a truckload of material, and I only have like 45 minutes. So I'm going to talk really, really fast. So if you are unable to keep up now, I hope you will keep up later when we start drinking something. I'll try to keep up with you then, okay. So, this is a talk about teams, about changing the way we work together. You're all in agile projects, right? You're all doing Scrum and stuff, right? Yeah? Oh, good. So, I'm going to tell you to stop doing that anyway. So it's going really fast. So pay attention. So here we are, 1964. This guy is Bob Dylan. He just got the Nobel Prize for Literature. He didn't show up to pick it up, but anyway, it's Bob Dylan. He said the times they are changing, right, in 1964. And the times are changing, but the times are changing faster and faster and faster and faster, right? You all know Moore's Law, right? You've seen Moore's Law? Well, it's here anyway. So Moore's Law basically says that the number of transistors in a dense integrated circuit doubles approximately every 2 years. And you might think, why on earth is he talking about this? Well, basically because that means that the possibilities we have until the transistors got so small that they're like one atom big, then it will stop. But in the meantime, the opportunities we have as technologies grow and grow and grow. And this might look like a linear line. It isn't. It's going up exponentially, right? That means the things we can do, they expand all the time, really, really fast. I'll show you some examples of that, right? If you would have bought a laptop computer in 1954, let's say on Amazon, it would have looked like this, right? They would have brought it to your house, it wouldn't have fit through your door. But anyway, you got a computer. That computer here has less computing power than, where is it, than my mobile phone here. This little device can do much, much more than that big machine. Now, I'm an old guy, right? I'm probably the oldest guy in the room, I guess. Well, it would surprise me if it wasn't true. I'm 53, basically. So is anybody older and dare to admit? No, right? See, I'm the oldest guy. When I started programming, spasibo. And that's the only word I know in Russian anyway. So when I started programming, I had a machine like this. This is an IBM PC 5150. And the thing here, with the red light on it, you can put a floppy disk in there, right? You guys have never seen a floppy disk, have you? Do you know what it is? Oh, yes. Oh, well, now the older guys are raising their hands, right? And this machine was pretty expensive too, right? You paid $3,000 for this machine. It didn't even come with a floppy drive for that amount of money, right? And we had to write code on it. I wrote code on my Commodore 64, which I still have, by the way. It had 36K bytes free to write code. And we still did that, right? And then, well, some years later, in 2006, Amazon introduced the cloud. That meant we could store stuff somewhere else. We could put our data somewhere else. We could even run our software somewhere else, basically on somebody else's computer. Now that opened up a whole new bunch of possibilities, right? That means that if you had been, let's say, if you were a bank, for instance, banks usually have mainframe computers sitting in the basements of their buildings, right? They still do, by the way. Now, that same computing power, you can now just get out of Amazon, get out of Azure, Google Cloud, or wherever you get it, and it will have more power, scale much better than the mainframe in your basement. That opens opportunities to totally different companies to do what you're doing. Let me give you some examples of that, right? Let's talk a bit about disruption. So, to give you an idea about the speed at which we're traveling, if you look at the amount of time it took for 50 million people to use some technology, it took 68 years before 50 million people had flown an airplane. It took 18 years before 50 million people had used an ATM. I can't even remember when I last used an ATM. I never get money from a wall anymore, right? I pay with my card, I pay with my phone. I don't have money anymore, me. So there's no reason to rob me anyway, right? So, and it goes shorter and shorter and shorter, right? Until like Twitter took 2 years to reach 50 million users. Now they probably went back to like 100, but anyway. But And it goes faster and faster. Look at what Pokemon Go does, right? It took 19 days to get to 50 million users. And that's all because of the enormous possibilities there are these days. And we make use of that. This is a chart of all the startups in 2019 in the Netherlands alone. We're a small country, right? Small country, but with 17 million people. And these are all startups in the fintech industry. There are about 400 of them, right? What if one of these decides to become a bank? What if you could have like 8 developers, a designer, some QA people, maybe a manager? I don't know. Probably not. But anyway, and you say, well, let's build a bank. Can you do that? Well, yes, you can, right? I know people who actually do this, by the way. And there's companies that do this. So in the UK, despite that they left the EU, they have an online bank called Monzo, and they have multiple banks in the UK. In Germany, they have something called N26. They're even cooler because they have a transparent credit card. That's cool, right? I think. And then, if you look at, sorry, this is in Dutch. If you look at what big banks say, well, they say, well, these startups are not really the bigger threats. The bigger threats come from the Amazons and the Apples and the Google when they started going into payments as well. And they do, right? Companies like Alibaba and Amazon do much more payments than regular banks do these days, right? So they come into the industry as well. Now, Apple, for instance, has introduced their own credit card. And I'm not a big fan, but it looks really cool because it doesn't even have a number on it anymore, right? It's just your name, and that's it. And the Apple logo, of course, right? So everybody can come into the market, right? Even from outside of banking. Like AirAsia is going into banking as well. And why wouldn't they? They do lots of payments as well. You buy tickets. Actually, I've never flown with them, but they do a lot of flights, a lot of in-flight merchandise stuff. So they do a lot of payments. They can go into banking because it runs on somebody else's computer. So everybody can do that. So everybody can enter any market. Like, what if Facebook had tried, well, I'm not sure it will succeed, but they have announced their own currency, right? That means you can pay in Facebook's currency instead of some country's currency or some union's currency. That is weird, right? And that is all because of us. Because we changed the whole field. We introduced all this technology. And now, that means, except for Facebook, well, this was on my Instagram recently. Facebook seems to be having problems right now. Lots of it, actually, but much more than it can show in this error box, basically. So we are now living in a world where everybody, anywhere in the world, can enter any market at any point in time. Right? That has never been that way before. In the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, you could not compete with a bank because banks had big computing power. Now, everybody can do that. And that goes for any industry, right? So that opens a lot of new possibilities and a lot of new opportunities. Also, well, it opens a lot of difficulties because not all companies can deal with this because we have been building software for years and years and years and years, right? Software usually looks like this, right? You start off with a nice, clean project and you think, oh, it will work. And then you add more features and more features and more features. And the product owners can come into your office and say, we need to add more features. And you're like, yeah, but I want to refactor the code. No, there's no time. Add new features, right? This is software development in a nutshell. I'll show you 3 slides that actually show software development in a nutshell. Do you know these guys? They're from the Czech Republic. This is a television cartoon series. In every episode, they do the same. They start with a nice, new, clean project, right? Just like we do all the time. And then something goes wrong, or they want to add something, so they build all these little features on top of it and change it and alter it. And in the end of every episode, everything explodes, right? This is software development in a nutshell, in 3 very important slides. Thank you. Now, the thing is, that all gives us a lot of legacy, right? Now, not all legacy products looks like this, right? This is the Pantheon in Rome. It's 2,000 years old. It still has the biggest unsupported dome in the world, right? So there were decent architects at work here. There were decent builders at work here. The walls are 6 meters thick. It's an amazing building, actually. But I don't suppose my software, your software, will last for 2,000 years. It just won't. Because other people will have built new software faster than we can and better than we can because they use the advantages of all the new technology, right? So that means if this is your stack, this is actually the stack of one of my clients, basically. So I asked the developers, so what are we using in the company, right? This is not a big company. This is a company that has like 40 to 50 developers and testers on board, right? This is the stack they have, right? This is legacy, right? You have to get rid of at least half of it to be able to move on. And you have to move on because everything will go faster and faster and faster. And then you might ask yourself, so what do we do? How can we compete in a world where anybody can enter any market at any point in time? Everywhere in the world. Well, we have to change stuff. That means we have to change the way we work together. Again, right? You're just getting used to Agile and Scrum and whatever it may be and having a coach. Do you have an Agile coach in your company? Oh. Don't start me up on that. I'm not going to talk about it. So, it's a good time to introduce myself, all right? Because we're going to talk about how you can redesign, how you can move forward. You have to change stuff. So, this is me. I'm Sander. I'm basically a dad. I have 3 kids, which is much harder than writing code. I travel around a bit, and wow, those were the older people again, right? So, parents, and in my spare time, basically, if I have any spare time next to raising my kids, I'm a CTO, chief architect, trainer, programmer, basically. I've been writing code for 38 years, making money with it for 34 years, I think. My current role is I'm the chief architect for this small IoT company. I used to work for this bigger company called Capgemini. I was their global agile thought leader forever. That might mean. This is my website, my Twitter tag, my email address if you feel the need to email me. You can all do that. That was the introduction. Let's move on. Good. That was a short introduction, right? So what you need to do is basically 4 things. The first thing being, you have to deliver smaller stuff. You cannot just create big things and hoping that it will come out after like 6 months. I talked to one of the developers on one of my previous teams this morning at a previous client, and when I left there basically, they were working on this product that it was almost in production. And I asked him this morning, so how is the thing doing in production? He said, well, it's almost in production. I said, well, when I left 2 years ago, it was almost in production, and now it's still almost in production? What have you guys been doing, right? It's too big. You cannot deliver 2 big things. And the next thing is, we're going to work in shorter cycles. And you're like, yeah, but we already work in sprints, right? Do you? Abandon those. Stop doing sprints. They're useless, basically. I'll show you why. And we're going to do that with even smaller teams. I currently work with a team of 4 people, including myself, and we go blazingly fast. And I'll try and explain to you why that is, right? And the 4th thing is, which I'm not going to discuss today, but it goes about microservices and serverless computing, which is a much more technical subject, but I'll skip that one. Otherwise, I'll never get through the slide deck. So let's start with the first one, smaller features, right? So here's the thing. Have you seen this thing before? This is called the Kid Nephron framework. It was written by a guy called Dave Snowden when he was working for IBM. And he basically shows that we are in different zones altogether. Right? If you are in the obvious zone, which isn't called obvious anymore these days, but if you are here, that means your problem and the possible solution are very much related. There's only one practice. It's the best practice, right? So, for instance, if my sink is used like Amazon Cognito or Azure Identity Server, whatever it's called these days, you can use any one of a set of solutions. They all sort of work, right? You have to do some analysis, get one of these solutions to work for you, done, right? That is still manageable. This is basically where managers think that they can manage projects, right? If you're in this zone, that's true, basically. The problem is, most of you out there are not in one of these 2 zones. You are either in the complex or in the chaotic zones.
In the complex zones, the thing you can do is say, okay, there is a dotted horizon. There is a point where I want to go to as a company, as a team, as an organization, with a product, and I can go in that general direction. How I exactly get there, I don't know, because technology changes so fast. The ideas, the requirements, the people, they all change all the time, right? We learn all the time. So that means I can go into the general direction and take small steps to get there. While I'm doing that, practices will emerge. That happens all the time, right? You learn something, you think, hey, this is nice, this is work. Let's see if that works there as well, right? Stuff like that. It will happen. And it will happen because you know sort of where you want to go. That is the complex zone. If you are in the chaotic zone, it's even worse. It's hard to discover where you want to go. If you are in a market where everything's new and it changes all the time, like my current client, they're in the smart energy market. They're a company called QB. They make a smart thermostat. And when they started doing that 8 years ago, that was unique. Now you can buy a smart thermostat at your local grocery store, for instance, right? Everybody has one these days. They're not unique anymore. So they need to rethink and reinvent. And that is hard because nobody knows where this market is going to. If you have that, you're in the chaotic context, right? That's even worse. Most of you are actually in here. That means trying to manage that, trying to have a plan established to figure out where to go and detail that out doesn't really work. If you have managers in your company who try to do that, point them to the Cynefin framework. Make them read it, actually, right? And they'll start to understand that it's impossible to plan this stuff. Short summary of this is basically the duh. Sure, we have the solution, right? And this is like, wait, that's the one. But if you're here, it's basically like, I don't know. And if it's here, it's even worse. Yes, well, anyway, the interesting thing is that Dave Snowden, the author of the framework, he says, well, in a chaotic context, searching for the right answers would be pointless. The relationships between cause and effect are impossible to determine, right? So he says, well, don't try to do this because it doesn't work. What he also says, and that's maybe more important, is that this particular context, the chaotic domain, is nearly always the best place to impel innovation. This is where you innovate, right? If you are in an innovative company, if you try to enter a market that already has established people in there, established players, incumbents, so to speak, you need to be faster than they are. That's cool. And you can do that. That also means that this, have you seen this? Waterfall? Yes, you have. Doesn't work in these contexts. It doesn't work for your companies and your organizations, right? Also, stuff like detailed plannings, throw them out. They're useless, right? So basically, the message is you have to stop doing all of these projects because projects do not work in our industry. Don't do that, right? So the second part. Oh, wait, you have to move to doing things continuously, right? You have to stop trying to deliver big chunks every 3 months or every year. What you have to start do is you have to start moving in very small pieces. Deliver very small features. Solve one puzzle every day. That's the whole process that is actually left. And if you do that, you are much better tuned to stay out of the way of doing these big projects, right? Because nobody needs to do these. So what else? So the next thing is these cycles, right? And you all laughed when you talked about Scrum, right? Most people do something Scrumish these days, right? And that's okay, right? It used to work. There's a lot of dogma in Scrum. It's not particularly Scrum, but it's the way people do it. They say, well, you have to do this and this in Scrum, otherwise you're not doing Scrum right. I couldn't care less whether I'm doing Scrum right or not. I've been into Agile since the mid-90s of the previous century, right? I'm a dinosaur. I'm an Agile dinosaur, actually. So I've done this stuff way before there was Scrum. Or, well, Scrum was there all along. I just didn't know it, actually. But so the thing is, if you look at typical Agile projects, typical Scrum projects, or any other approach you might use, they have things like sprints or iterations, right? And they last a certain period. They take usually 2 weeks, 4 weeks. It depends on what you're doing, right? And it's sort of like an artificial construct in your process to sort of make it manageable. That was a useful thing when we came from waterfall 25 years ago, right? We didn't have sprints and iterations. We didn't have cycles to improve. So we introduced short cycles. That was short 25 years ago. 2-week cycles are not really short in 2020. You can go much shorter, right? That means these sprints that would usually fail, by the way, like, oh, this is nice, right? This comes from a project in Belgium. So I'm not discussing Belgium, but it's just an example. So this is a burn down chart of one of their sprints. And they were like, yeah, we have all this work, we estimate it. Doesn't really work, right? Estimation in this industry. And then we start doing it, and ideally, by the end of the sprint, we're here. Oh, we're not. We have some work left. And the next sprint, oh, we have even more work left. And even more work, and even more work, and even more work. Another project manager, there was a project manager on this project, he got really angry. It was like, you idiots, you don't know how to estimate. And I was like, that's true. We don't know how to estimate. We shouldn't do it, basically, right? Don't estimate at this low level, because it never works. And he was like, you're idiots. You cannot even plan your own work. The problem is, we have these artificial periods in time that we have to deliver something useful within that period. How do you make something useful in 2-week cycles, 70, 80 cycles after each other? The longest project I've been in, I was there until sprint 76, right? How do you still make 2-week bunches of work? You can't. Just don't, right? You have to abandon this stuff. Move on. Move to cycles that are much shorter, that basically are, as the Agile Manifesto says it, in 2001, they're continuous, right? This is the point. You're moving to continuous work. That means solve a single problem. Stop sprinting. This is one of my sons footballing. He's actually chasing one of his good friends by there, but he's playing for a different team. Doesn't really make sense, right? So anyway, you have to move everything into short cycles. That is, on a daily cycle. This, by the way, is not an advertisement for Jira, because I'm not really fond of it, actually, but it sort of displays what we did here. And this is one of my teams, and what we did is we moved the Post-its from left to right in as shortest time as possible. There are no sprints in here. It's just work. We picked up, do some activities on it, and move it out again. And the shorter this period gets, the faster you go, the better you are, right? That's the whole point. If you're thinking, hey, he's explaining Kanban. No, I'm not. Kanban there is no process in Kanban, right? Kanban basically is a visualization technique, a really good one, but there is no process called Kanban, right? You have to organize your own work, and that's the most important point. You also have to automate everything. Everything. I mean literally everything. Except for writing code and writing your test, all the rest can be automated. We do that at my current team, basically. And you have to test from day one. So instead of having all of these manual tests, like people coming up to you with a spreadsheet and saying, oh, we need to press all these buttons and then check what happened. That's not fast enough, right? That slows you down tremendously. So you have to automate everything. And you have to start from the bottom. You have to start with having unit tests for everything in the kitchen sink. And then on top of that come your API test, your web test, your scenario test, your integration test, your pen test, whatever you might have. All of that is automated. It runs in pipelines, right? This is our current pipeline. Yes, it looks like our current pipeline. We do everything in the pipeline. We unit test, we do static code analysis, we do, oh, it's here. We even do syntax validation in linters. We do audit dependencies, so a lot of security checks in there. We do integration tests, and it continues and continues and continues. All of that is automated, right? So the end-to-end test, we wrote them down. We're using a new framework called Tycho, I think, from ThoughtWorks for that. And we have written all of the tests, and they run automatically. That means every change I do in my code base, it runs through the pipeline all the way up to production in like 5 minutes, depending on how fast actually Amazon wants to deploy on Fargate. But it does that usually pretty fast. So that means you have to automate the shit out of it. This is SonarQube. We have a 79.2% code coverage on most of our code. That's on average. Most of our repositories are above 90%. Because that gives you the trust to be able to move forward really, really fast. So the thing about automated testing is that it will give you early and continuous feedback. Every time I check in my code, and even before that, I get immediate feedback from the pipeline, wherever in the pipeline it breaks. And I fix it immediately, right? Now, there is no higher speed than this in software development. And this is where we are going to. Also, I realized that only last week, is that I don't even debug my code anymore. I'm a developer, right? So the debugger is basically my second nature. And since we have automated all of these tests, and we have so many of unit tests, I haven't touched the debugger anymore, right? I basically, if it doesn't really work well, I write a test. I check the test, I leave it in, change the code, test it again, etc., etc. So the debugger has rendered useless these days. That's nice. For me as a developer, that's really nice. So again, you can stop doing projects, right? You can just deliver feature after feature after feature after feature, as this field should be, right? So the second thing, or the third thing actually, is we're going to do this with smaller teams. Now, I've been working with teams and trying to motivate teams since like the mid-90s. So I've been trying to do this for 25 years. So I've worked with many teams, big teams, small teams, international teams, distributed teams, co-located teams, teams of Java developers, teams of front-end developers, teams of .NET developers, teams of COBOL developers even, right? Yeah, they have teams too. And so I try to figure out how to work with this. And I always thought that Agile was nice for this, right? And like having this typical Scrum team of 7 plus or minus 2 or 6 plus or minus 3 people really works well. In the meantime, over the last couple of years, I figured out that you can have even smaller teams and go even faster. But it all comes down also to being able to do this in a continuous mode, right? So the thing is that Agile, as it was written down in the Agile Manifesto, it doesn't change, or it actually doesn't solve all the problems we have these days, right? Like, this field is growing and growing and growing. We all know that. It moves faster and faster and faster. That means we need more people, or as managers call us, resources. I hate that. I always, if a manager says, oh, we need more resources, and I say, well, so what do you mean? More computers, more tables, chairs? What do you want? I say, no. I mean, he means people. They have a hard time saying the word people, right? It's like, anyway. So this is a recent research in the Netherlands. Again, it's in Dutch, but it basically shows that IT people are in every industry. Recently, a hospital broke down in the Netherlands because the systems administrator had lifted up their computer, their server. It broke down while they lifted it up. Then they switched to the spare. The spare worked, and then the system administrator was like, oh, we can switch on the other one again. And then everything broke down. And the whole hospital had to shut down for this, right? This is a good example of we're everywhere. We change the world as IT, right? And that means that we will need to start learning more and more skills. We need to get broader, right? You cannot say, oh, I'm a front-end developer or I'm a tester, but I only test using Selenium or whatever other tooling, right? You need to get broader at what you do. You usually have a sweet spot, which is basically your T-shaped, right? You have a sweet spot, something you know about a lot, you care about deeply. In my case, that would be something like software architecture, microservices, some programming languages I like TypeScript, for instance, and writing beautiful code. That's my sweet spot, right? But I do know little things about a lot of other stuff. And you need to know that if you want to work with small teams, right? If you want to be able to compete, you need to become T-shaped, basically. Also, working 9 to 5 has had its best time, right? I don't work from 9 to 5, but I'm freelance, right? I can basically work whenever I want, as long as my client supports that. And the problem is in the Netherlands, this is the traffic jam on our most important highway in the Netherlands. It's the A2. And it runs from Utrecht to Amsterdam, and the other side runs from Amsterdam to Utrecht. Usually in the morning, both sides are stuck. And I'm like, why am I driving to Amsterdam? The same amount of people is driving the other way around. Why don't I just stay at home and read my fucking email first before I get to the office and then go to the office? Or leave before the traffic starts or after the traffic, whatever, right? Make it more flexible, and we need to. Well, not here in Minsk, by the way, because I took this picture yesterday. There is no traffic here, right? Not compared to what we have in the Netherlands. In Belgium, it's even worse, by the way. Go live in Belgium, nice. But so 9 to 5 doesn't really work anymore. You, as a parent, you know this, right? Parenting is unpredictable. Kids get ill, right? You have to go home early. You have to go to the doctor, the dentist. They come late from to school, right? And then you have to call them in sick at school. And I always forget that, right? And then my kid has to come back the next day really early because he's punished, and he's mad at me. Stuff like that happens, right? So 9 to 5 is out of the door. Also, our mind doesn't work from 9 to 5. Software development and everything that goes into it is a really creative job. Creative people don't work from 9 to 5. Despite what your manager might think, like this is the brown line, right? Like it's like, yeah, they come in the morning and then they do some work and then they go for lunch and then they do some more work and then they go home and they come back the next day. It doesn't work like that. I have my best ideas in the shower, in my car, on an airplane, wherever, right? I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm thinking, oh, wait, that's the solution. I open up my laptop. I actually do, by the way. It drives my girlfriend nuts, by the way. But anyway, and then I start typing. I'm like, this isn't, wait. And then I could be typing for 3 hours in the middle of the night, right? That's how it works. And you should facilitate that as a company, not block it. Communication. Most of us, maybe except for me, are really introvert people. That means communication, it comes hard, right? And then we go into the stupid Agile project and you have to do all of this. This is all communication. This isn't work, guys, girls. Sprint planning, refinements, daily stand-ups, management meetings. We have OKR meetings, demos, retrospectives, Skype calls, whatever you might have, right? They're all blocking us from doing actual work. It takes 15 minutes to get back into flow if you've gone to a meeting, right? Most of these meetings are useless. I always say to my team, if you don't really contribute to a meeting, don't go. Stay with me. I never go, right? So I try to avoid them all the time. This does nothing for going faster, right? Communication is best done in small groups. The more people you put into the loop, the slower it gets. So if you can organize these refinement sessions for the whole day with the whole team and everybody in the world, they're going really slow. Nothing ever gets done during these long refinement sessions. So stop doing these, right? Move on from that. Also, open floor plans. Do you like open floor plans? No, right? No. You're allowed to say no here, right? So it doesn't really work. How do you focus? My current client, the office manager, sent an email out last week saying that we could all get noise cancellation headphones if we want to. What's the point in that? Just get rid of these open floor plans, right? They don't do us any good. There's research being done. And yes, it is true. Your open floor plan is ruining your productivity. So what does that say? It basically says, if you have an open floor plan in your office, it's nice to sit there every now and then. Usually the coffee's better there. But why not work elsewhere? In a cafe, at home, on the train, in some other room, wherever, right? And you can do this if you make your team smaller. Because if you only have to get together with 2 or 3 people, instead of 20, it's much easier to say, you know what? We'll go out into the restaurant that's next door. Because it's nice and quiet there. Usually, at 10 in the morning. And then there's this thing with autonomy, right? We all want to be autonomous, right? Do you want to be autonomous? It's sort of like a mantra in these agile coaches. Oh, you're all autonomous. You know what? If I say to a team that they're autonomous, you know what the first question is they'll ask me? The first question will be, so what do you want us to do? And I'm like, figure it out. You're autonomous, right? You can make your own decisions, but that's really hard. That's why I put a picture up of my son. He's a drummer, as you can see. It took him 2 years after he finished high school to figure out what he wanted to do. And well, a lot of people in his environment were pushing him, oh, go to university. And I was like, I don't know. And then he started doing it for about a month, and he came back and I'm like, nah, I want to study music. And I'm saying, go do that, right? It's your dream, it's your life. Figure it out, how to do this, and go off and do it. And now he's doing it, actually. He's studying at a musical conservatory. He's doing great, and he's now becoming a professional drummer. I love that, actually, by the way. So the problem with self-organization and autonomy is that for most people, it will be way out of their comfort zone. Right? It is not easy to do this. It's not easy to step up and say, hey, I want this, or I don't want this, or don't treat me like this, or do treat me like this, or I want to work with WebStorm in an office that's full of Eclipse. Right? Or saying, hey, I want to use WebStorm while the whole team is doing VS Code. Or the other way around, but I like WebStorm, so I use WebStorm. This is really difficult, especially if you're an introvert. So I've been working with these teams for 25 years, and this is really hard. I do not know how to teach them autonomy. That is really tough, because the thing I can do is say to them, you need to draw now. I can draw the first 2 circles, and then you figure it out. It's hard, right? And then companies come up with stuff like this. Have you seen this? This is at Zappos in the US. It's just terrible, right? I wouldn't want to work here. This is like sort of mandatory fun, right? This is even worse. This is the lag of my girlfriend in a job interview for a highly placed IT role at a well-respected retailer in the Netherlands. The meeting room has glass walls and is filled with these little plastic balls up to her knees, right? She's literally wading through these plastic balls for an important job interview, right? When she got there, she was like, I'm not going to work here, right? This is way overdone, right? So I try to figure out what to do with teams and how to make them more autonomous over the past years. And the only thing that I figured out is if you give people less rules to follow, less procedures, and that's basically also what Agile's saying, right? Figure it out yourselves. Then people will work better. I'll show you a short movie clip. This is, I was on a trip in Indonesia, and I was driving in a taxi through a big city on Sumatra, going off to the jungle, and I took this small video clip. And this is interesting to see, because if you look at the traffic here in Medan, in Indonesia, you can see all the lines, right, on the road. There's all these lines and all these signs saying what to do and what not to do in traffic. Do you see them? No, because they're not there, right? The whole city. And this is a city of 2.5 million people, so it's more or less the same size as Minsk. And there are no rules. There are no traffic signs. There's no guidance. And we're trying to get around the corner, right? And we survived, by the way, because otherwise I wouldn't be here to show you the movie clip. But it's really weird. You know what happens here? So, did you see the traffic light, by the way? It was both red and green at the same time. What is that, right? And but anyway, we survived. So the thing is, what happens here? Right? What's the point you can learn from this? The thing is, people in traffic, if there's less rules, they communicate all the time. They look into the eyes of the people in front of them or next to them and on the road. They press their horns all the time. If you've been to Southeast Asia, you know the sound, right? Wah, wah. That's like, let me pass. And then they do, wah, wah. And that's like, thank you. It's the same sound, but it's different. I don't know why. But it works. And then, if I take it back to the Netherlands, this is the crossroads near where I live. It's overregulated. We have an overregulated country. There's traffic signs everywhere. It's even hard to keep up with all the signs on the road. I'm very happy that cars are becoming more autonomous too, because they'll have to take over for all of these signs that are on the road and all these regulations. In the Netherlands, it's probably more safer to drive through a red light than through a green light. Because if you drive through a red light, you make sure you pay attention. I'm kidding, right? No. This is my girlfriend's theory, actually. So, developing software with all these new possibilities that we get all the time, it's becoming more complex. We are in a complex zone, or even worse, in a chaotic zone. Now, Edsger Dijkstra, a famous Dutch computer scientist, he wrote a long time ago, he says, the programmer has to be able to think in terms of conceptual hierarchies that are much deeper than a single mind ever needed to face before. We are doing the most complex work on the planet. And it's even worse because we changed the planet. Remember that hospital that broke down when the system administrators tried to lift up the server? We do that, right? We are the ones that write software that is in everything. From rockets that go to Mars to self-driving cars Driving off cliffs. I thought about this, that I could have my program, reprogram my car in a way that I put somebody in it that I really dislike, like, I don't know what, somebody, and then drive it off a cliff. Automatically, right? And there's no way to change that behavior. We could do dangerous things, right? And we are responsible for the quality of this all. And that's really complex, because there's so many roles to fulfill, so many different skills to know when you create software as a company. It's very hard to do. That means we have to change it. And then all these enterprise agile frameworks coming in, and a lot of companies saying, oh, this will save us, right? Because we need to scale agile, we need to scale Scrum. We will move to SAFe, for instance. Oh God. This is a nice one. This does not make things smaller and simpler and faster. It goes the other direction. This is good if you're a consultancy company and you want to hire as many consultants as you can to companies that introduce this. You know where the customer is in this picture? He's here, right? He's being hit by this train. That's what it is, right? So don't go into this enterprisey stuff, right? Like, for instance, this one. How many roles do you need to create software, right? Well, 3 maybe, right? A QA guy or girl, right? People, I should say people these days, right? QA people, a QA people, a developer people, and maybe a designer people. So that's basically it, right? How many more people do you need? You don't need all of this stuff. Oh, then we could say, we need Spotify. We're all going to do Spotify, right? Spotify was a nice model. It was written down in 2014. It was sort of a snapshot of how Spotify worked at that point in time. Well, basically, the thing is, you're not Spotify. Well, unless you work for Spotify, then you are Spotify. But still, they have changed. They have adapted. They have learned over time. So implementing a model that was written down in 2014, if you're not Spotify, and do that in 2020 doesn't make sense. You should learn all the time. Do not just copy somebody else's model. And this is the most important sentence to me in the Agile Manifesto. This is still a very powerful sentence. And the most important word in this sentence is this one. It's the word uncovering. That means continuously get better at what you do. And continuous does not mean every 2 weeks. It means all the time, right? You learn all the time, every day. So don't just copy somebody else's model. And then you could stop doing projects. So I'll show you a little metaphor that we use here for organizing how we work with teams these days. And I've been slowly working towards this stuff, and I'm still looking at and wondering about why this works so well. And the thing is, what we've done is, so we said basically, if you look at traditional teams and waterfall organizations, they're organized by role, right? So the architects are on floor 14 in the building, and this is the developers are on floor 2. Then the QA people are on floor 1, and here's the DevOps people. They're usually in the basement. I've seen this actually, but it's and in Agile teams we said, let's do collaboration. Let's create responsible teams where all these roles are in. That's much better, right? But the problem is software development got too complex. So we got to a point where we need a whole lot of different skills, just like this big band, which is called the New Cool Collective. They're actually cool. They have all these different skills, and together they can make the software. So I started working on this idea and said, well, what if we would have a collective of people that together have all the skills to move the product further, right? And you could do that. You could call that a collective, and all these skills are still in there. And from those skills, every work item you have, every single problem that you try to solve, so you go into the office on Monday, you say, okay, so what's the problem we're going to solve today? And who do we need to solve that particular problem, right? And you can create small teams that work together on a single work item. Like this one, for instance, has an architect, a QA guy, a back-end guy, and a domain expert, and this team has like a front-ender and a QA guy together, right? It changes all the time. It's basically dynamic. So you don't fix those teams. You just let the team figure it out. You let the collective figure out, this is the next work item. Let's see who's going to work on this. Sometimes it's the people that know the most about it. Sometimes it's the people who want to learn about that particular topic, right? And you can alter it all the time. And once you start doing that, you realize that the only process you'll ever need in software development is this. right? In the morning, you come in, or whatever you do to discuss, you pick a small problem that you can solve in a single day. And that is really important. That's also really hard to do, right? You form a small team of people that can do this problem, that can solve this problem. You discuss it for a bit, wherever you are, whenever, whatever channel, in every channel you want to, you do the work, your market is done, you disband the team, you go home, and you repeat it the next day. This is the fastest process I've worked in, right? If people ask me, what's your process? This is my process. Can it be more minimal? Probably not. This is as fast as it goes, right? I think this is a new slide. I put this in this morning, is that this is typically what we do every day. This is what I do with my team every day. I'm saying, wait, what is the small problem that we solved today? What did I do yesterday? Well, nothing, because I was on a plane. On Wednesday, I tried to split my front-end code from the use cases that are also in code to make them more testable. Took me about a day. I solved it. Then when I opened up my laptop yesterday, it didn't really work, so I had to do it again. But that was the problem I tried to solve. That's it, right? And then these microteams, this is what they look like, right? This is a developer, a Polish developer, by the way, and here is an ops guy, right? And here is, for instance, a developer, 2 developers, and a tester. He's not allowed to sit, right? And that's how you can see he's the tester. And here's some other guys. Again, these are 2 developers working together on something. Or here's a software architect and a developer. You can see this is the software architect because he's praying for it to work. And it changes all the time. It's just dynamic. This is my current team, by the way. And this is a picture I took earlier this week. And this is a nice pattern. It really works. So my time is up. So I'm going to move you to a short retrospective. Oh, by the way, stop doing projects, by the way. So here's the retro. Small recap in about a minute. Is that okay? Can I use a minute to do this? Are you okay with that? Or you want to get next thing? So, here's the thing. We are not in plannable environments anymore. We have never been, by the way, in this industry, but we are all, most of us are in complex and chaotic zones. That means you have to move faster. What you would have to do is create small features, really tiny ones, solve one problem per day, in really short cycles with really small teams, like 4 people at max, and in smaller components. That's basically what your life will look like in software development if you move on with this. That means all of this traditional stuff, including the traditional agile life cycles and the enterprise agile life cycles, they will go. We will move to faster and shorter cycles. Solve a single problem every day. This is probably the key slide in this deck. Do this with a small team and just do that. And then this is the only process you will ever need. Pick a problem with a small team, solve it, move on to the next problem. That's all the work you can do. And if you think, this is too hard, we can never change to doing this from where we are now, well, the thing is, it only takes a very simple thing to start doing this. And that's you. Because if you're waiting for somebody else to start changing your life, that will never happen because it's not in their interest. If you want to change something, you need to change it. And in this industry, we have to continuously keep learning all the time and never, by the way, forget to have fun. And one more thing, but you probably have already guessed this, please, please stop doing projects because they're useless. So, this is it. The slides are over here if you want to see them. Thank you for being here, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of the conference too. Any questions? Don't hesitate.
Feel free, because we have
Well, the thing is, because you work together, so if you come from this larger collective, like let's say a group of 20 people that together built the whole product, with every work item, there's usually people who are very aware of what they're doing. They're very T-shaped, they're very specialized in that particular field. And if you join them as a more junior, you learn even faster from that, right? So not what? No, but you learn by doing the work, right? It's learning by doing all the time. That's the best way of learning in this industry, just by doing it, right? Let the junior touch the buttons and the senior look with him.
Hi.
Hi.
I came a little late, and the first slide I noticed was that you were saying automate everything and have a really high code coverage.
Yeah.
And my question is basically, how do you, like, from what I faced, basically, when you have high code coverage, you start losing, kind of cementing your code, yeah? Start losing with the flexibility of your code because this high number of tests kind of slows down your development. How
Oh.
you...
I've never noticed that, actually. So the thing is, actual unit test, if you write actual unit tests, they only test a unit in isolation, right? So that means your architecture will stay in place. So one thing that I didn't mention, because that would take me a day to explain, is you have to use architectures that are evolutionary. That means they can grow with you all the time, right? That means if you have layers or onion architectures with specific patterns in there and specific roles for these specific classes, then it's easier to keep that code flexible. And unit tests shouldn't break that flexibility, actually. And to be honest, I write unit tests for all of my code, and I've never seen this happen. What it actually does, it gives me a lot of trust that I can change stuff, even very deep under the covers or very deep under the hood. I can still change stuff and be sort of sure that it still works. So I really, really like having that stuff at a high levels of code coverage, especially when you're writing frameworks, for instance. That's mandatory.
Okay, thanks. Can I have one more? Just quick.
Can you have one more? There was maybe come back soon because you had a question too, right?
Thank you very much for your topic. I want to share some pain because there are some projects, some teams, some companies where you cannot be agile. You cannot have continuous delivery, you cannot have continuous testing. For example, companies...
I see your pain, yes.
Yeah. Companies that develop something like satellites, for example.
Like what?
Satellites.
Oh, satellites.
Yes, space satellites. We cannot test when they're in products like this.
Sure, so you're basically saying if there's hardware involved, it slows you down?
Yep.
Yeah, it does. I work for a company that builds hardware, by the way, and we still do this.
So maybe not in our country.
So no, it basically means, it's not black and white, right? It's not like saying, okay, you can do Agile or you cannot do Agile. There's a gray scale somewhere in the middle, and some companies are more on that side of the scale and some companies are more on that side of the scale. And you always have to figure out within that scale, how far can you go? How fast can you take it? And that's different per company.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah.
I have a question. What about big projects? For, I don't know, 100 people.
Yeah.
If we make small teams for 4 or 5 people in one team, we've had 25 teams, and it's hard to communicate between these teams.
Yeah, but they don't have to communicate, right? So, no, the thing is, if you have large... So people always ask me, how does this scale? And then I had a big discussion on LinkedIn, I think last week or something, and hundreds of people tried to interfere, and they're like, yeah, but this doesn't scale. And I'm like, yeah, I couldn't care if it scales. The thing is, I know how it can scale. It's that if you split up your big project into separate domains, and the bounded context pattern from domain-driven development is really good for that, and you have a collective per product or per domain, and within that collective you have the total set of skills of people who you need to actually push the domain further, and from there it takes itself. So you don't have to form these teams explicitly. You just say, here's the group of people that works in this domain, so what's the next thing we can solve? And some people will automatically start forming their own teams, and they disband at the same day or maybe a day later to form another team. So it's very organic, actually, within this collective.
Like microservices?
Yes, well, the interesting, the fourth part of this talk, which I'm not going to do because if I start talking about microservices, I can be here all night, basically, is that's actually the best architecture to do this. And then you have to talk about stuff like Conway's Law, but that's probably beyond topic. Maybe over beers later. Is there beer? I don't know. I hope. So yes, true. That's the best architecture to do this, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah. So,
hello again. Thank you for the presentation. Quite informative.
informative?
Yeah. Why not?
Oh, just kidding.
Okay. So the question quite similar to the previous one. It was maybe a bit faster than me. Okay. So the question is how to form the team, and another question if the team is formed correctly, but there is different persons like front-end developer and back-end developer. They are often say that this is not my part, this should be done on the back-end.
Yeah.
And often there is a real problem that this could be done at both places.
Yeah.
So who will decide in such case if the team probably goes with no management at all?
So why would the management need to decide? So management usually, so if you would let management, it depends on how good your management is, right? In the Netherlands, management usually means people who have never written code, right? Could be different here. I've seen companies where it's totally different. But if there is a manager that has never written code in his life, doesn't know what to do it, and you let the manager decide where to put it, that's kind of weird, right? So there's only one place where you can decide it. It's the people who work together. They have to decide it. And by the way, it is good practice to have your architecture sort of sketched out, but at a very it doesn't have to have a lot of detail because there's lots of things, micro things to discuss in there. Also, the team, they form like every day, right? Or every 2 days, depending on how long the work item is that they work on. So it's not like these people work together all the time. It changes all the time. That means they start working with other people continuously. That means you will actually see that there is a consensus forming in the group about how to work and where to put stuff. And that works really well, actually. What we do is we use Confluence for that. We write such decisions we make about how to do stuff, how to design stuff, and how the architecture looks like. And we put them in a single Confluence page. And if you look through it, you can actually see all the decisions we made from start to where we are now about how to work. And they change all the time too, by the way, because we learn and then we say, oh, this wasn't a good idea. Maybe use this way or split it up this way. So it's very, well, it's organic, as I said, right? I
see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you had a second question, right? So before, otherwise I feel sad. So otherwise,
That's all.
oh, sorry. Yeah.
It will be the last.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, really sorry, but we haven't time.
Okay, hello. You just said that small deliveries is cool and it's really fantastic. But do you have an experience in projects where some processes are too long, and if you deliver something, you should stop it, and if you stop it, you should start from the beginning, because of any process is scanning or working with a huge amount of data, it will change, and if you stop it, you can't deliver every day because you never finish your processes. And if you have such experience, what did you do?
Well, yes, I have been in companies that say, no, we cannot deliver until everything's finished, until we did the migration and do everything that we need to do this. The only thing that you can say about it is it might be true, but for the sake of that particular company, it would be better if they could go shorter, right? So that means you have to think about breaking stuff up into even smaller features or smaller practices or smaller problems to solve. And the problems you solve on a daily basis don't necessarily all contribute to what the user is seeing, right? It could also be, so I was refactoring some of our code, or actually restructuring our architecture a little bit earlier this week. And that is also a problem I wanted to solve. Or we set up a CDN for our content earlier this week too. That was something that 2 people did on the team. Now, one of them knew about how to do this, and the other one learned. So if stuff like this happens, it's usually a sign that the work items you have are too big, right? And there's always a way to break it up. I've never seen work that I couldn't break up into small parts. And I've been doing this for a long time. So I've had lots of people saying, no, we cannot break this up. Managers usually, who don't know how to break stuff anyway. But if you can always break it up into smaller problems. And you have to do that. You have to be able to solve stuff on a daily basis, because that's the fastest way to move forward. So if you have this, the main question you should ask yourself is, how can we break it up into smaller parts? And you always can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, guys. Thank you, Sander.